to the kitchen. Today we're going to be making shortbread, and it's ginger shortbread. The original recipe calls for white chocolate, but I don't really like white chocolate, so I'm going to be making ginger pecan shortbread. And this recipe I found in People magazine, actually, and it originally comes from a cookbook called Dining In by Alison Roman. Here we have our ingredients. Flour. I'm going to be using up the last of my gluten-free flour and doing the rest in regular whole wheat flour. And sugar, molasses, ginger, vanilla extract. It calls for actually ground allspice, but I don't have allspice, so I'm going to be substituting ground nutmeg, cinnamon, butter, obviously, and we also have some special ingredients up top here. After we get our cookies all ready and cut, what you do next is you brush them with some beaten egg, and then you roll them in this rough sugar here. It calls for Demerara sugar. I could not find Demerara sugar, so I'm using Turbinado sugar instead, which is very similar. They're both this coarse, large grained sugar that is slightly less processed than your regular white sugar. And then we also sprinkle them with some sea salt. And I'm substituting my Himalayan pink salt since I don't have sea salt right now. Do something special to our butter first. So this recipe calls for 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons. So 2 sticks is the same thing as 1 cup. Okay. As you can see there, 8 tablespoons equals half cup. So these two together is 1 cup. And with our third stick, we just need to cut off 2 tablespoons. Don't cut toward yourself. Sorry, every time I tap the counter, this bowl resonates. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay, so there's our 2 tablespoons. And now we do also need to cut our butter into 1/2-inch pieces. We're going to put these in the microwave for a bit so that they're not so hard, so that they'll be easier to mix. I'm going to go with 1 minute, 50% power. Alright, I stopped at about 3 seconds before the end because I thought it was getting a bit too melty. It did start to liquefy a bit, so next time I would do it a little bit less. Alright, we need a 1/3 cup of our regular sugar. Ooh, gee. I think the recipe actually says granulated sugar, just so you know that is the same thing as just regular white sugar. And we also need a 1/3 cup of molasses. Now, I'm not usually really a fan of molasses, but I tried these cookies anyway, and I really liked them, and they did not taste overly molasses flavored to me. So if you don't like molasses, still, I would definitely recommend these cookies. Alright, I put the molasses covered measuring cup and the buttery bowl in a pot of water in the sink to soak. That way it'll be much easier to wash them when I'm done here. And we need a teaspoon each of our ground ginger and our vanilla. Alright, I'm actually going to use the half teaspoon because my whole teaspoon is not going to fit. This recipe does also say that you can use fresh ground ginger. I don't know if you've noticed these before at the grocery store, but you can just buy, I just made a mess. You can just buy a root of ginger. Just looks like a lumpy yellowish root. And then you wash it and peel it, and then you grate it yourself with a grater. I just decided to go the easy route and buy the ground ginger. If you do use the fresh, then you have to use 2 tablespoons of grated fresh ginger rather than 1 teaspoon because the dried version is a lot more powerful than the fresh version. And I just wanted to point out I am using the pure vanilla extract. I would stay away from the ones that say artificial vanilla flavoring. That's just not as good as using the real thing. And if you're not sure, you can just look at the ingredients. The only 2 ingredients are vanilla bean extractives in water and alcohol. That's actually how they make this. They take a whole vanilla bean, they soak it in alcohol, and then it's not alcoholic, so you don't have to worry about that. The alcoholic properties fade away, but it preserves the vanilla, and that's how you get real vanilla extract. Alright, now we're going to beat this for 3 to 5 minutes on medium speed, and our goal is that it's going to be light and fluffy by the time we're done. Partway through, you need to stop and scrape down the sides of your bowl. You might need to do that a couple times during the process, just because you can see I've got these little butter bits and things on the sides here. I want all that to get mixed in evenly. Alright, and then I'm going to scrape off my spatula on my beaters because I don't want any ingredients stuck to the spatula to not get mixed in evenly either. And as you can see, it looks light and fluffy, so we're all ready for the next step. We need 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm using 2 half teaspoons. And you know what? I'm not going to level them off because I always like to have a little extra cinnamon. Why not? And we need a 1/4 teaspoon of our allspice, which we're using nutmeg instead of that today. So I'm just going to fill this half teaspoon about halfway through, and that'll be a 1/4 teaspoon. Alright, now we need to beat this on low speed until it's just combined, so we don't want to overbeat it, in other words. My mixer has 6 speeds, fast, even faster, super fast, extra fast, and so on. I'm joking, but basically they all seem pretty fast. Even the lowest speed isn't really that slow. So I always do all my beating basically on the first setting. So, but if you have a mixer that has a low speed that actually seems low, then definitely use that for this. And I'm going to scrape down the bowl just to help me get this mixed without over mixing. Okay, and I would say that that is just mixed. Now I need to scrape off these beaters. Alright, and I did put my beaters in the sink to soak with the other dishes. That will make them much easier to wash later. You just don't want to leave them in there for a really long time because you can end up with rusty beaters that way. Alright, I'm going to add my 1 cup of chopped pecans. And I'm just going to mix these in by hand so that I don't risk overbeating my batter. Okay, our recipe says to divide our dough into 2 halves, then put each half on a piece of plastic wrap, and we're going to use the plastic wrap to roll our dough into 2 logs about 10 inches long and 1.5 inches diameter. I prefer to use wax paper for that. I don't even own any plastic wrap actually, and also the wax paper, I just find it easier to handle than the plastic wrap, which you'll see. So I'm going to get a nice big sheet. Just sort of eyeball the dough into 2 halves. Alright, that's about half. Alright, so the goal here is that we're going to get it into a log, like I said, and we're going to use that. I'm going to use the wax paper to do that so that your hands don't get sticky. So it's sort of like rolling a snake out of clay, like what you used to do when you were a kid, or maybe you still do it. But it's with dough, and we're using the plastic wrap so it doesn't get sticky. And let's see, my hand is about 6 inches, so I think this is actually about 10 inches long. So we're just going to smooth it out a bit. So it looks a bit more cylindrical, and the ends, I keep ripping my wax paper, and the ends aren't too skinny compared to the rest of the roll. Right. So now we're going to wrap it and just make a little package. Okay, and then once I've done the other one, both of these I'm going to put in a plastic Ziploc bag because it doesn't need to be in something that is going to be airtight. Alright, we need to chill this now in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 hours, and then we'll be back to cut the cookies. Alright, welcome back. This has been in the refrigerator for about 1.5 hours, so it's ready to go. We're going to crack our egg. Alright, and it says we need to lightly beat this egg. Alright, now it says that we need to have our 2 baking trays lined with parchment paper. Unfortunately, I'm out of parchment paper, so I'm just going to use the plain cookie tray, and I'm just going to put a little drop or 2 of olive oil on each cookie tray and spread it around so that we'll have a greased cookie tray. Okay, so it's just a lightly greased cookie tray. You can't actually see any gobs of oil on it. Alright, so we need to brush this with our beaten egg solution here. You can buy special brushes that are just for cooking and baking. I'm just using a paintbrush. It is a clean paintbrush. I haven't used it for painting in ages and ages. So I'm going to use that instead because I don't have a pastry brush. It does take a little longer just because this brush is so tiny. Alright, now we have a plate full of our sugar, the Turbinado sugar. And we're going to roll this in the sugar. Since this is kind of too long to fit on my plate, I'm just going to cut it in half. Alright, now we're going to slice each of these, well actually this whole thing, into 1/2 inch rounds. And the recipe is predicting that we're going to get 20 cookies out of this. Okay, so that is the cookie. Alright, and I've got them about 1 inch, well they were 1 inch apart on the cookie tray. And finally I've got this one little endy left, and I have a bunch of these little bits that flaked off as I was cutting. So I'm just gonna mush all those together into one cookie so we don't waste anything. There we go. Alright, we're going to put these in for 10 to 12 minutes. Alright, and last time I made these, I don't think I really had to flip them. They seemed like they cooked pretty evenly, but I'll check them at about 10 minutes and just make sure that the top ones aren't getting too brown on the top and the bottom ones are not getting too brown on the bottom. And if they are, then I will flip them for those last 2 minutes of baking. I'm going to get my next 2 baking sheets ready so that the cookies will be ready to go right in once the first batch is out. Oh, also, I'm not sure if I explained myself correctly with the flipping. I did not mean flipping the actual cookies over. I meant switching the pans in the oven. So a lot of times when you're making cookies, the recipe will tell you to switch the trays halfway through, flipping the pan that was on the top down to the bottom and putting the pan that was on the bottom on the top to help make your cookies bake more evenly. Okay, I just realized that I forgot the sea salt. So I just opened up the oven and put the sea salt on. Hopefully it will stick, even though they were about halfway through baking at that point. So I'm gonna put the sea salt on these ones now, before I forget. Alright, you can see our cookies are done. I may have left them in slightly longer than necessary. You can see they're a little bit brown around the edges, which is what I was looking for. Being a little bit brown around the edges is a good sign that your cookies are done. And also if they look dry and not wet. Alright, these have been here for about 15 minutes, so we're going to move them over to our cooling rack to cool the rest of the way. Alright, thanks so much for joining me in the kitchen this week. I hope you enjoyed the process, and I hope you try it for yourself. These are really great to give away as gifts or to eat yourself.